Hey guys, it's Brian here, and I wanted to record another industry commentary type video for the web area, and I just got my hands on a new mic, so I thought I would re-record a video. I've actually tried a couple of times and it just didn't come out. And so this video actually comes from a guest post that I did recently on Thin Line Marketing's website, where I talked about three major things that I see a lot in the web industry that quite frankly are a little shady. Things that I think people should know about, because the reason these things even happen in the first place as often as they do is that most people either don't know that it's happening or aren't aware that it is shady when it happens. And so I'm hoping just calling them out will be useful to people. I'm going to cover two of the three things that I covered in that article. I'll leave a link in the description to the article, but the two that I want to talk about today are working with multiple types of the same business in the same area, and the length of time that a lot of web developers will take on a website totally unnecessarily, and then will charge commensurately to reflect that, where it's not fair. So start with number one. What do I mean by that? I mean that if you're doing any kind of marketing really, but especially if it's SEO, it's, to me, rather unethical to work with, say, two pizza places that are practically across the street from each other, selling the same type of pizza and going after the same type of customer. It's unethical, because what somebody's paying you for when they hire you to do their marketing is, I want the breadth of your ideas and your creativity to help me narrow down how is my product different, why me and not the competitors, and how can we really put that out there. Well, from both a creativity standpoint and a loyalty standpoint, how can that really work out in their favor if their main competitor across the way is also paying you to do the same thing? Now when you have a great idea, for instance, who are you going to give that idea to? And whichever one you don't give it to is not getting the benefit of what they paid for. And if you say, well, I want to be fair and I want to give the idea to everyone that I'm working with in that industry, well, then you're also letting everyone down, because what they're paying you for is, give me an idea the other guy doesn't have. Well, the other guy does have it now. So then that doesn't work out at all. And I don't know how these companies can so boldly go around doing that. This is no joke. In a conversation that I overheard recently as part of a sales pitch where they were talking to a painter, they said, we already have two other painters like you in the area, and we're looking for 10 ultimately. Why 10? Because there's 10 spots on the first page of Google. Wink. You know, like, the thing that really bugs me about that, beyond just the arrogance to assume that naturally your SEO is so supreme that when everyone does a search for painting, the only 10 things that are going to show up on the front page are all of your 10 clients and nobody else's. Let me tell you something, after doing this for over 10 years. No matter how good your SEO is, there is always somebody else doing at least a good enough job to end up somewhere on the front page. But anyway, I don't want to derail myself too much with that point. But 10 painters in one city, and you're going to represent all of them, and you're not only going to not see a problem with that, but you're going to be proud of that, and you're actually going to tell people in your prospecting meetings that that's what you're trying to do. And they're pitching it like this is amazing, and the painter listening to it thought it was amazing, and as I overheard it, I'm just like shook my head at it. That's incredibly unethical, in my opinion, to do that. You have to offer them some kind of exclusivity, or else you're not really offering them what they're paying for. And if you say, well, I can't afford to only work with one painter, well, then you're not charging enough. And quite frankly, if your results were as good as you're trying to portray them to be, you could justify charging enough to only work with one in the area. That's just my 2 cents on that. And this sadly happens a lot in the SEO space particularly. And like I said in the beginning, I think it happens both because a lot of people who end up working with these SEO companies don't know that they're working with their competitors, or they may not have thought of it the way I've just talked about, and so they might be loosely aware of it and not realize what a conflict of interest that is. I remember years ago, there was an agency, and they were working with a Peterbilt semi-truck dealership while they were actively prospecting Freightliner, one of their biggest competitors, who in this case was literally right across the street, and they wanted to do SEO for both. And that just, the only ways I can see that becoming ethical is if both of your clients are aware of each other, they're aware that you're working with both, they're okay with it, because maybe to go back to the idea of painters, if one of them says, I only paint commercial properties, and the other one says, great, because I'm a house painter, well, then you're not going after the same clients. That's okay. Okay, so the second point that I wanted to cover, it's industry standard. When somebody says, you're going to redesign me, say, a WordPress website, how long is it going to take? Most developers will say 2 to 4 months. And since that's what everybody quotes, and people have heard that so many times, that's just become an accepted norm. People think, oh, well, it always takes 3 months to do it, so they don't even balk at it and they don't question it. I worked with a developer years ago at the point in my career where I had stopped building websites and just wanted to focus on content writing and SEO. And so I worked alongside developers as they built the site and did that kind of heavy lifting. And 1 or 2 of them in particular would always take 3 months for a site that I always had this weird suspicion as we were building them, they didn't really need to take that long. They would show me updates of like, look at this page I just made, or look at this element I just added to it, isn't it cool? And I'd look at it and think, it is cool, but that strikes me as something that if I had taken an afternoon, I could have knocked that out in a couple hours, and you've taken a week and a half to get that done. But at the time, I didn't want to make waves. I'm like, who am I to tell you how to do your job? You're the developer, do what you got to do. Well, fast forward a little bit to, I still work with developers now, but I've gotten back into tools like using Divi and some other things for my own sites and just for side projects and things like that to reacquaint myself with the design process and what's new in the industry so that I can basically commentate about it and whatnot. And one of the first things that I learned when I got back into using Divi was I was correct. I replicated something very similar to the point I made a second ago that I thought I could do in an afternoon, and sure enough, I could. And so it really just showed me in that moment, none of these websites, as I kept playing with things, none of them need to take 3 months. What happens a lot of the time with these developers is they're either using really antiquated tools like Genesis Builder, which is just, in my opinion, it's dated and it's overly, there's a lot of custom stuff you can do with it if you want to go that deep in it, but for 80% of development as people think of it, it's needlessly complicated. And it's the kind of thing that if you had used another builder, it might have taken 15 minutes to do, but it's going to take 45 or an hour or more to do the same thing just because of how silly complicated it is. And I think a lot of the times when you see developers saying it's going to take 3 months, it's because they're using dated software. And in a lot of cases at agencies I've seen or worked at, it is, we take a new web project on and let's kill it for like a week to show the client some real progress so that they feel good about what we're doing. And then let's essentially move on to other projects and take a month-long vacation as far as this one is concerned and do nothing for like a month and a half. And then right when we're creeping up into that 2-month point, right when the client is starting to be like, so what's happening? Then let's come back to it and just finish it off and then have something to show for it. And so it's like they say, no, but because it was a 3-month project, we can charge between $6,000 and $10,000 because that was a lot of time it took us to do that. When in reality, if you actually just gave this project your focus, it might have only been 3 weeks or so and not 3 months. But that's just not the way they code. And in some cases, like one of the developers I worked with years ago, I think it just comes down to laziness, to be very frank with you. You're not busy enough to have 12 projects that you're juggling that you have to keep coming away from one of them. You could focus, your schedule allows focus, you just don't. And you get away with it because, like I said in the beginning, 3 months is such an industry standard that no one will balk at it. And so if you take a project that could be done in 3 weeks and you just basically mess around for 3 months, no one will question it. And then they charge the price that's commensurate with it. There are a lot of really good developers that will charge between $1,500 and $3,500 for a website that to me looks exactly as good as a $6,500 website or more. And those people that do it cheaper will do it in a month or less. What's the difference between the two? Nothing other than focus and better tools. And if you're using outdated tools that make you take longer, why should the client pay for that? And if you can't get it done in faster than 3 months, then you're being left behind, because there are so many developers these days that are doing it faster that if you're not going to be one of them, again, why should the customer pay for that? That just doesn't make any sense to me. And that's another thing that is happening so frequently. Unless there's some massive e-commerce store or some major membership login backend that takes a ton of time to flesh out, or some kind of major customization that goes well above and beyond your standard business, here are my services, blah, blah, blah type of site. Unless all of that, I could say pretty categorically, there is no reason 90% of the time why your standard business website built on WordPress needs to take 3 months. And so if you're working with a developer that is giving you that kind of time span, probably they're either overcharging you or they're overcommitted. There's certainly plenty to talk about related to this. I just won't go on any longer in this video because I don't want it to be an hour long. But let me know what you guys would like to hear about next, and I'll be happy to do it. And thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.